Welcome to Industry Insights with Route Consultant, your front row seat to the fast-moving world of logistics and beyond. Each week, we bring you game-changing insights, real-world strategies, and fresh perspectives to fuel smarter investments and build stronger businesses. Join us as we sit down with expert guests to explore emerging trends and pressing topics across a wide range of industries. This is Industry Insights. Welcome back to Industry Insights, and today we have Ellen Voie here from the Women in Trucking Association, and if you haven't heard of that organization, they help industries across the country to really help women find more ways into this trucking industry to be more successful as they're there and to remove those barriers that we see all the time. And Ellen herself has been in this industry for decades and spoken all across the world. So it's really exciting to have her in the studio today. And we're going to have actually a two-part podcast that comes out. So the first part, if you're watching this week, we're really going to talk about the organization, how she founded it, why, what the industry looked like at the time, and what it's progressed and evolved into as she's been working in it. And then we're going to come back for part two in the following weeks and really talk about the practical realities of implementing all of that they're teaching and the barriers you can run into and really how you can be successful as you start to bring more women into the workforce. And if you're a woman driver yourself trying to get into this industry, some of those barriers you'll run into and how you can be successful there too. So Ellen, again, welcome here and thank you for being here live in Nashville with us.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the air.
Yeah, so we'll actually start a little bit before Women in Trucking was founded. How did you even get into the trucking industry for the first time? How did that become part of your world?
So actually in high school, I wanted to be in broadcast journalism.
Okay.
So, broadcast journalism, trucking.
Yeah,
there's
exact
not really
same,
a
right?
mix. Yeah. And so I'll make a long story short, kind of short. But so in high school, I did go to school for broadcast journalism. And my mom got sick with Lou Gehrig's disease. And so I moved back to the state of Wisconsin. And I got a job drafting at a steel fabricating plant. And I had taken drafting in high school, shop classes and things like that. So I was just drawing material handling equipment. And one day they came to me and they said, "We'd like to move you into traffic." And I said, "Okay, what's traffic?" And they said, "Well, we'll pay for you to go to school. We'll help you get your diploma in traffic and transportation management. You'll start out as assistant traffic manager." And so I did, and I learned how to read. This is before deregulation.
Yeah.
This was 1978. So I learned how to read tariffs, how to audit freight bills, how to driver qualification files, logbooks. A lot of the things are the same, but it wasn't automated like it is now. And so that's how I got my start in traffic and transportation, worked my way up to traffic manager. And then when I started my family, I did consulting for 18 years because I had a very valuable knowledge to do driver qualification files, keep the trucks legal, keep drivers legal. I even applied for authority for carriers.
Okay.
So it was different in those days.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in the world, you're tangential to it. What were some of the things you were seeing early on, that started to make you think maybe there needs to be more of a focus on women in trucking as opposed to just, using it as buzzwords, like that it really needed to be an association?
Well, there really were no women in trucking. I can tell you that.
That started it, yeah.
And also being the traffic manager at a steel fabricating plant was very interesting because before deregulation, everyone had to go by tariffs. So all the freight rates were the same. Well, we had great freight because you couldn't break it. It was steel and it was welded and it was heavy. So it was very expensive to haul. And so I got bribed. I got offered some pretty amazing things for my freight. And I said, get out. Anyway, I learned that the industry really didn't know how to handle a female in a very male populated environment. But I'm going to fast forward to, I didn't have any idea about starting a women's organization until I was working at Schneider. And my job was to figure out how to attract non-traditional groups. And Schneider, I felt was very progressive in the fact that this was 2006 and my title was Recruiting and Retention Manager of Recruiting and Retention Programs. Okay. So I wasn't out there talking to drivers. I was out there trying to figure out what are some overall ways that we can bring more drivers in, specifically women, returning military, Hispanics, and seniors. Those were the four groups that we were focusing on. But as far as women, I started realizing that women were looking for security and safety. And I thought, well, we had our own operating centers that were fenced in on laundry and showers and things like that. Why weren't we pushing that? And so I was working on my pilot's license, and I belonged to a women's aviation organization. And one day, it just struck me: why is there an association for female pilots, and not an association for women in the trucking industry? So that's when the light bulb came on back in about 2005. And I started looking at their website. I went to their events and I started copying what they did. I told them I was copying.
Yeah.
And they were fine with that. And Women in Trucking was born in March of 2007.
Okay. So we're almost at 20 years now.
I know.
So that's got to feel crazy to look back on. So 2007, you decided to start it. What was it? Was it just you? Did you bring other people in? What was kind of those early steps?
Right. Well, first of all, I reached out to a bunch of very powerful women in the industry. Lana Batts had been president of Truckload Carriers Association, other women who had a voice. And so I reached out to them and I said, what do you think about this? And they're all like, yeah, it makes sense to me. And got an attorney to help with the bylaws and articles of incorporation and all that. And at our first meeting, we sat down and we said, yeah, this is needed. We think this is needed. And we wrote our mission statement. And you kind of alluded to it at the opening, but the mission statement when we started was to encourage the employment of women in the industry, to address obstacles that might keep women from succeeding or entering the industry, and thirdly, to celebrate success and to feature the pioneers, the women who came before us and maybe paved the way, so to speak. And so that was our mission, and that's what we focused on. And it was the beginning of a recession.
Yeah. I was just about to say, that 2007 was fine, and then 2008 hit. That's got to be, talk about a time where you're really trying to promote employment and, everybody's letting everyone go. Like there's just a huge financial crisis. How you talk about, you reached out to powerful women and got them involved. I don't want to minimize that's not something that everybody just does. You don't just reach out on LinkedIn and start a company. Like that's not a trivial thing. I think a lot of people, as they're trying to get started, they're trying to figure out, how do I get this off the ground? So not only did you successfully bring in some really successful and powerful women to the organization early, but you did it at a very tough time. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, I think we glossed over it a little bit, but you managed, I think your early board had, people like Walmart and Penske. Like, how are you?
Not at first.
Okay. So that took a bit. Yeah. Cause
it took a little while. I had run the Trucker Buddy program for 6 years. So I had been in nonprofit organizations. So I had and that's why I formed Women in Trucking as a nonprofit. Yeah. I felt that it would add to the credibility because I thought, I don't want people thinking I'm benefiting from this. It's not a corporation. So as a nonprofit, but I knew a lot of these women, they also had a reputation. The fact that they all bought into it immediately was just amazing. But the first year, a lot of people who knew me from my Trucker Buddy days said, okay, Ellen, we understand what you're doing. We see the need for it, but we're going to give you a chance the first year. But if you don't deliver, we're not renewing. So the first year was make or break. I mean, if we hadn't brought in, and the first year my goal was 1,000 members, and we hit it.
Wow.
The first year, but again, the second year we had to deliver on what we said we were going to do, and that was to, like Lana Batts said, the only thing a nonprofit has to start with is communication. What are we communicating to our members? You have to give them a resource. You have to give them information. Well, guess what? There was no information on women. In fact, companies didn't break down any data by gender. Insurance companies couldn't tell you anything by I would go to meeting after meeting, and I'd sit there and I'd raise my hand and I'd say, do you have that broken down by gender? And they're like, oh no, Ellen's in the room again.
I didn't see her. She walked in. Oh, man.
And I just pushed and pushed. And I'll never forget when I had a board member from JB Hunt on, he said, it took me hours to find out what percentage of our drivers were female.
Wow.
And so they weren't tracking. And so once we started saying, well, look at this company, they have 12% female drivers. You have 2%. Why? What are you doing different? And then asking our members, like for drivers especially, what is it you're looking for in a carrier? And what was cool was over the years, companies would come to me and they go, oh, we just did a survey. We broke it down by gender and this is what we learned. Different organizations would start doing that. Retention companies would start doing that. And the break came when the American Transportation Research Institute did their crash causation study. And Rebecca Brewster called me one night and she goes, heads up, tomorrow morning, this is coming out. We found that male commercial drivers were 20% more likely to be involved in a crash in every statistically significant area than female commercial drivers. Yes.
Yeah, that's like
that's what it gave us credibility. And so then I could stand up in front of companies, and instead of saying, well, let's put a woman in because 50% of the population we haven't looked at, now they go, wow, this is what women bring to the industry. And not just as drivers, but in the boardroom, women are more risk averse too. So finally getting some data to be able to stand up in front of groups and say, this is what we know.
Yeah, because I can imagine how difficult it must have been. Because you talk about some of the people who were bought in that were women that were powerful that had seen it themselves, so they knew it. But how hard were some of those conversations? Even maybe even as you started to get some of the data, we were going to a company and saying trying to start those conversations. Did they let you in the door? Did they just say, oh, that sounds nice, thanks for visiting, like we'll look at that in the future? What was the real kind of sticking point that you would have to get to get past that initial kind of that's nice thought process? I'm
glad you asked that question, because it was very hard at the beginning when they would say, oh, wow, we need drivers. We haven't looked at 50% of the population. And that was the attitude at the beginning. It's like, oh, they can fill a seat.
Right.
And I'm like, great, women can fill a seat, but this is what women bring. Yeah. And so I would say that the companies that got it, the companies that were more open-minded and more looking for gender equity, those are the companies that said, so explain to us how we can attract women, how can we retain women? What are women looking for? Other companies are like, oh, wow, they can fill a seat. So it was the companies that started asking those questions and listening to their own employees that suddenly started getting more female drivers.
Yeah. And that it has to be validating to see that suddenly the conversations shift a lot in terms of what the first conversation isn't like a multi-week education to set the foundational ground floor. Like that has to be nice. That it's I'd imagine that's an easier conversation these days than it was then.
Well, in the beginning it was things like, wow, maybe you should have uniforms that are cut for women.
Yeah.
Or the truck cab manufacturers, I love the fact that we started speaking up and saying, wow, these women, women are built differently. Guess what? You're designing a truck for the 98th percentile male, which I still don't know what that means. Even nobody's really explained that one to me. But they started saying, oh, you're right. Maybe we need to start designing truck cabs that are more ergonomically conducive for women. And I'm not saying design a truck for women. I'm saying make things more adaptable. Like if you talk to some of the women, earlier drivers, they couldn't reach the pedals, or they couldn't see over the dash, or they couldn't see the mirrors. And so we would send women down to the manufacturers and have them give feedback. And the other thing was truck stops. I'll tell you, when I first started going with my former husband, he was an over-the-road driver, the truck stops were locker room style.
Yeah.
So for me to take a quick shower, he would have to stand at the door and not let anyone in. Well, how friendly is that for women? And also a lot of women would sit at the counter where it said truck drivers only, and they get kicked out. So it was overcoming those kind of perceptions that, women can do this, and women are doing this, and more women are doing it. So it was little things like that. And the companies that started listening and saying, oh, let's get women's uniforms. Let's get more restrooms. It's the companies that started doing those things that were actually the company of choice for female drivers.
Okay. I imagine I can hear this rebuttal, and I'm sure you've seen it many times of, well, we don't look at gender. We just hire the best person for the job. So what's the conversation response there? Because I'd imagine that's the basic way it's the way a lot of people respond to diversity in general.
So if you want, and we're talking drivers again, I do need to stress that women in trucking is more than
just drivers, yes.
But a lot of the focus has been on drivers because of the gap concern.
Yeah.
So my response to them is, first of all, you need to understand what women bring, okay? And anecdotally, I can't quantify this, but women are better with paperwork, better with customers, take better equipment, take care of the equipment. That's what carriers tell me all the time. Now, again, I'm generalizing, so it's not across the board, okay? Because you're always going to find exceptions, right?
Yeah.
So those things, women are more risk averse. So if you're a safer driver, wouldn't you want to be traveling on a road with 80,000 pounds next to you as someone who's going to be more risk averse? And I can tell you, women will leave a carrier because they don't felt heard or safe. Guess why men leave? Men leave because of pay parity. So if he gets a gravy load, then I better get a gravy load. Well, that's not what women are looking for. So guess what? If you want to hire more women and have safer drivers, you better start listening to what women are looking for and accommodating what women are asking you for. And so the carriers that are doing that, I stand up in front of them and say, you're the carrier of choice. You can leave those others behind because you're going to have a safer fleet, less turnover. Women will stay with their carriers longer, typically, according to the data. Again, I'm generalizing. But I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you want female drivers and not just to fill a seat.
Yeah. And I mean, the nice thing there too is if let's say that female drivers prefer, a safer operation and more communication. If you're building a culture that prioritizes safety and communication, that's a good thing regardless. And so if that is your explicit reason that you're doing it, but it also impacts the organization as a whole, as opposed to if you're trying to keep up with pay parity, there's always going to be somebody else around the corner that's going to pay a little bit more, a couple cents more. So
but if your safety culture is really your safety culture. So I saw some pretty horrible Qualcomm messages come through for drivers. For example, during the protests, Qualcomm messages saying, I actually have a driver took a screenshot saying the company said, well, if you're in the middle of a protest, drive slow. And if you hit someone, wait until you're away to call the police. I'm like, seriously? Would you want someone to tell you if you've got people in front of you, just drive slow? What kind of a culture? And then, if you're saying, well, the roads are slippery, or there's a hurricane, or I feel unsafe because of the weather that's coming. Oh, come on, this is trucking. Yeah. So if the company really doesn't have the safety culture that they say they have, it's going to come out in the way they talk to their drivers. Yeah. And oddly enough, some studies that we've done on inspections show that women are getting inspected fewer times. Again, this is an ATRI study. And we're trying to figure out why that is. And we think it's because women are looking at the safety records of the carriers before they go there. And I'm hearing that from drivers. They do look up the safety records. They look at how maintained their equipment is, how old the equipment is. So if women are already choosing carriers that are safer, and those companies are getting more women, they're going to be safer carriers. Again, I'm just telling you.
That's interesting. No, it's really interesting of just the idea that if they're already self-selecting for the better carriers, it's not just I need to close the gap to make sure that I have these safe women. It's that it can have an exponential effect of like, if I don't have a safe operation to bring women in, they're going to choose somebody else and the gap widens.
And they do their homework.
Yeah. If you're thinking about the organization more today or, even over time, what do you think is the thing that people most often misunderstand about what you guys are trying to do?
Well, first of all, the big perception is that it's just for drivers. Not true. We represent female diesel techs, safety directors, CEOs, everyone. And we do educate and inform, network. The other thing is a lot of people think you have to be a man to join.
A woman to join.
I'm sorry. You can't be a man.
I was like, I didn't think that at all, actually.
You're right. Because I'll stand at a booth and guys will come up and they go, I guess I can't be a member. And I'm like, why?
Because I'm not a woman in trucking.
Right. And the point is, you can be a member if you support the mission. Yeah. And that's the goal. So I'm proud to say that about 15% of the members at Women in Trucking are men. And nothing makes me smile more than when I see a guy and a couple drivers, and they'll walk up and he shows me his pin. I'm a member of Women in Trucking.
And I'd imagine that just because you're a woman in trucking doesn't mean that you're doing a good job of supporting the mission. I'd imagine there's probably some resistance you encounter from women as well in the industry, and it's just it's about education on both sides, I would imagine.
So the resistance mostly comes from women who have been in the industry 20, 30, 40 years. And their response to me is, well, you weren't there for me. Why should I support you? And my response to them is, we need you.
Yeah.
We need you. We need your insight and your expertise.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think I think there's always a mental hurdle that somebody could have and may look at different, like different things. But I think it's about education on what matters and kind of the whole mission of the organization.
Supporting the
mission.
Yeah,
exactly. So if you're thinking back over the journey, was there a moment where you kind of realized that really I'm changing things? Like this feels like finally, like there's a black and white moment where I can say, okay, wow, this is different. And this is because of our organization.
There was actually a couple. One of them was there was I'll say a EEOC compliance initiative that the government, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, did a compliance initiative on yellow, YRCW. Yep. And they came in, they said, you need to join Women in Trucking. They actually told the organization, and the attorney had called me and she said, I need to understand what you're doing. And it was a compliance initiative. It wasn't a lawsuit necessarily, but they told YRC, you need to rewrite your job descriptions. But again, they were union, and so they had more restrictions on than another company might have. And so we worked with them. They would put our logo on their trailers, and and so when that came out, it was like, wow, we had credibility that the government is enforcing this initiative and using women in trucking. And two other. One of them was getting an award from the White House.
That'll do it.
It was in 2012, and for being a transportation innovator, champion of change. Wow. And President Obama had his champion of change initiative, kind of like the Bush's 1,000 Points of Light. And so to be a transportation innovator, champion of change, and to be the only one there in the trucking industry was pretty cool. And then one other time, which was personal for me, walking into a board meeting at a strategic planning session, and I looked around the room and I saw these huge Fortune 100 companies, the Walmarts, the Amazon, the FedEx, the UPS, WM. I looked around and I go, they support the mission. And I had a lump in my throat looking around the room thinking, look at all this power in this room to advance a mission. So that was one of those, wow, kind of like a Sally Field, like they like me. It's kind of like, wow.
But I mean, it's got to be so validating. You think about what it was when you started, and you're like, I hope this works. I think it's important. I think there's a couple others who do, but we'll see where it goes from here. Like you talked about having year one where it's like, people are willing to give me the first chance, but I gotta make sure it goes well to being at the point, you're getting an award from the White House, or you're in a boardroom with Fortune 100 companies that are all there to talk to you about how to make changes. So I think those are good examples. That's what I would say.
The other big indicator is the conference.
Yeah.
We started the first time with 300 people, and it's been, I think, 11 years now. And, my last year there, we had 1,800 attendees, which I think makes it one of the largest trucking industry conferences, and it's 85% women.
That's awesome. Yeah. and for those who are interested, when is that conference typically?
It's in November, and it's in Dallas, Texas. It's called the Accelerate Conference.
Okay, great. Now, we think back, you started small, you that was your vision, and that was the mission that you were working with other women, but it was a small community that you really get to wrap your arms around what you're doing. As the mission and as the organization continue to grow, one of the things that I could see slipping is suddenly we've got this mission and it's become symbolic or even performative. Like, how have you managed to keep things practical and still keep people involved?
Well, I retired. I knew that as an entrepreneur, I'm a starter. And it's kind of like when you have a child who's 18 and they're going off to college, and you have to let it go. Yeah. And I had a 5-year succession plan in place. So we knew that I was going to retire in 2023, because I also knew that the board, with all these huge companies, they wanted KPIs. They wanted spreadsheets. They wanted budgets. And that's not Ellen. Ellen is getting out there and talking to people and saying, you got to believe in the mission. And this is why we need more women. And this is what women bring. And just let me talk about it. Where it was, I really struggled. The staff has grown to over 20. You know, and with the association management firm and the conference, and it's grown way beyond my wildest dreams, but also beyond my capabilities as an entrepreneur. So by retiring in the end of June of 2023, I'm still founder, and I'll always be founder. So I'm still
involved.
That from you. No, I'm still involved, and I still do a lot of industry events.
And I think that's important for any entrepreneur to understand, you know, I started this, and there's the feeling, we talk about it all the time, of all I have to do is just spend more time and more hours because I started this. I can make it happen. I just have to put more of myself into it. But I think recognizing the limits of what you're capable of and the team you need to build around you, and also just the moments where you need to step back. I think that's some of the biggest success stories I've heard are where people took a step back as opposed to, you know, tripled the time and energy that they spent. I think that's when I hear a lot of people burn out and things don't work out. But those step backs and those kind of reframing, you know, what's important to you, where you see your value, and how you can continue to progress the mission is what's important. So you think back on, you know, how you've seen things change. What if you're to think about the biggest ways that you've seen the perception of women in trucking evolve over your time, what would you think?
Well, the biggest change I'm going to go back to is that the industry has seen the value that women bring. And I'm thrilled to say that I think that women in trucking is responsible for increasing the percentage of women in all roles, increasing the exposure of women. I had women on Wall Street Journal, you know, Oprah Magazine, Ricky Lake Show, you know, Megyn Kelly, you know, different shows, and having drivers talk about what they do, having the image team out there discussing with the media, having them give ride along. We gave Diane Sawyer a ride along. You know, giving the exposure to the industry, I would say, has made a big change, because it makes the rest of the non-trucking public look at these jobs and go, oh, that's a woman in there. And if she can do it, then maybe I can do it. So I would say the biggest change is women are becoming more comfortable entering an environment that might not have been as welcoming to them 20 years ago, but it sure is now.
Yeah. And I think the things that will probably, you've probably seen this, and I'm sure that others have, where they look at an industry and they're not surprised to see a woman working in it. I think that's the other thing I would say that I know people talk about and see that in a lot of the industries we serve, it's no longer oh my gosh, there's a woman here. Like, what are they doing here? It's of course there's a woman here. Like, and of course there are as many women here as there are men, or at least we're moving towards that.
We're not as surprised anymore.
Right. Yeah.
There are still people, especially when a driver is 5'0", you know, and hops out of an 80,000-pound truck, and people go, "Did you just get out of that truck?"
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't be shocked, you know, for sure. But there's a lot of people that would be shocked that, you know, we serve a lot of like the FedEx and Amazon industries where they have to move really large packages. And there's just, you would see someone and assume it's not possible, and sometimes they're some of the best delivery drivers.
Absolutely.
And so it's just, there's an automatic built-in assumption that hopefully is starting to be degraded some. Yeah. I think just as a last question to end this portion for part one is, you know, again, we mentioned at the beginning, you're 20 years removed. If you got the chance to go back and give yourself some advice as you're starting this out, you know, to go back and talk to your entrepreneur self beginning this, what would it be?
Boy, that's a really good question. No one's ever asked me that one before. But I guess it would be, you know, maybe having more male allies at the beginning, because the first board was all women.
Okay.
And we talk about diversity, and we need men to support what women do. We need men to be at the table, to have a voice, because there's still a lot of men running companies. So if we don't get their buy-in. So I wish I had maybe more men at the very beginning. Now, I will tell you that the board has had many men over the years. So I feel that was remedied as we progressed. But I still think there could be more men who support the mission.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's That's fair, and I think it's. I've heard you basically every time we've talked. You've been very explicit of like, this is not just for women. It's about anyone who supports the mission, and we need everyone too.
We need everyone.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of covers the basis of how this evolved and grew over time, and we've touched on some of the benefits of why you would want women in the workplace. But I think what we'll spend next time talking about is, okay, I know that this is what I want to do. I'm running a business myself. How do I make it happen? What are the practical realities of doing so? So thank you so much for being here. We will be back next time to talk through it all.
I look forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks.